Hello.
Hi.
Hi. How are you?
Good. Hey, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you at 11. And I just wanted to make sure that you were here and all logged in. So
Yep. And I am sending Madeline a short intro, and then, or maybe I should CC you it too, and
okay.
then she has questions as well.
Perfect. Okay, I'm gonna stop you there because we're already streaming live because it's past 9. No, you're fine. There's no one really watching yet, so you're okay.
Okay.
All right. So let's jump off, and yeah, you can follow up via text or email.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Hi, welcome. Welcome to Research Quest Live. We're excited to have you joining us today. We are going to be continuing an investigation we started yesterday, but you're of course welcome to jump in today if today's your first day. We are working on What's Killing These Trees, Part 2. And if you have not already done that, you can enter the student access code RQ Live into the website. And before we get started, I have a few things that I would just like to go over and share with you. All right, so welcome to Research Quest Live. We're really excited to have you here. This is a program designed for middle schoolers. Of course, all are welcome to participate. Younger folks might just need a little extra help. This program is an ongoing program. We will have classes daily every week, starting at 9:30 Mountain Daylight Time. And we will be offering Q&A sessions with experts and scientists at 11 a.m. So you can join us for both our class, and then from class we'll go into study hall where we have some independent work time, and I'm going to be available to help you if you need any help at all. And then at 11 we'll have our guest speaker for the day. All right, a note for teachers. So Research Quest Live is available on demand or to participate through these live sessions. If you want to learn more about Research Quest and the standards that it addresses, it does meet both science and language arts standards. You can go to the Research Quest website and visit the Teacher Support tab. There you will find information about assessment as well as developing critical thinking skills in your students, and in detail which standards are addressed for both science and language arts. All right, today we're going to be asking questions. We are going to be using models. We are going to be analyzing and interpreting data. We are going to be constructing explanations. So we're going to be hitting a lot of those science skills that we use in science class. Like I said, we have a 60-minute class today. After class, we will have study hall. I'll continue to be available during that time to help you if you need help. And then at 11 a.m., we're going to have a guest speaker today. Her name is Vanessa Bailey. She is a University of Utah graduate student in geography, and she works with the scientists at the Natural History Museum of Utah. We're excited to hear from her later this morning, so we hope that you stick around for that. Also, let me just go over the viewer and the website. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Here we go. All right, so you can see, in fact, I'm going to remove my video there. Here's the screen that you should see right now. And if you need to, the viewer, you can shrink it if it's in the way at any point. So you can see I can click here and minimize the viewer. Or where you see my video of me talking, you can make that bigger if you need to expand the view. You can adjust the volume, of course. You can push play or pause at any time. So it's very flexible for you to use today. Now, also here, you can see this text right here. So here's where we're going to download and print our Research Assistant notebook. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. That's going to open my notebook for today. And my name is Tracy. I didn't introduce myself. So my name is Tracy. I'm going to be your teacher today. I'm going to go ahead and write my name there on my Research Assistant notebook. Now, this notebook, I'm just viewing it here on the internet. If I wanted to, I could download that. That will ensure if you take notes in your notebook, if you download it, it will just make sure that you don't lose any information. We have had a couple students report that they accidentally close this and then they lose all of their work. So you can do that. You can also print it. Okay, if you want to go ahead and print it out, if you have that option at home, or you can just look at it here and you can take notes on a regular piece of paper and pencil. All right, so that's the viewer, the Research Assistant notebook. I'm going to go ahead and log in now. Here's my code. Going to hit submit. And here I am now in Research Quest. So we are going to be working on change in the Uinta Mountains. And we are going to be using the normal or not. Oh, sorry. We're going to be clicking on that one. If you want today, I would love to know who is out there and who's participating in class. I forgot when I was going over the viewer to show you the ask a question button. Okay, so on the viewer, if you select ask a question, it's going to open up this page. And I would love for you to please write in, let me know who you are, where do you live, and I'd love to hear from you. Get to know all of you students that are out there. All right, today we are working on what's killing these trees. So I'm going to go ahead and select that, what's killing these trees. And we are going to be working on steps, the end of analyze, so we're on step 12, and we're going to be working through steps 15 to 19 today. And then, let's see, tomorrow, just so you know where we're headed, tomorrow we're going to be working on who wins and who loses in a rapidly changing forest. And we're going to start steps gather and analyze tomorrow. Okay. All right. So today we're working on what's killing these trees. We're going to start here around step 11. For those of you that might just be joining us today, let's do a quick recap of what we did yesterday. So I'm going to show video 7 and start there. Now, again, if you want, you can watch the video with me, or you can pause my viewer if you'd prefer to watch it on your own screen if you have any issues with my volume.
We know trees need water, air, sunlight, and soil. The clues we found, the orange pine needles, tell us water isn't reaching them. Did you notice that too? So I'm wondering if these trees are dying of thirst. What does Dr. Mitch think? I saw what seemed like signs of drought. Is that what's killing the trees?
The short answer is sort of. It's natural to see these signs and think drought is the killer, but often the first answer I find isn't the whole story. It's usually more complicated than that. To get the full answer, I have to study the problem more closely.
So basically, if I find an answer, I should wait and keep looking?
Right. In science, we look for evidence that leads to explanations, but some evidence may have more than one explanation. For example, what evidence makes you think it's drought?
The orange pine needles.
Okay, so one explanation for the orange needles could be low rainfall or drought, but maybe the tree has a disease or predators that are inside the tree cutting off the water before it reaches the needles.
A disease or predator. Those are different from my drought explanation. I guess there's more than one explanation for the things I observed.
We need to dig deeper. Look for signs of predation, animals eating the trees, pathogens, microscopic organisms that kill the tree, or signs of other natural disturbances, like wildfires. If you assume right away that the only killer is a drought, you won't catch these other clues. You'll just keep noticing evidence that confirms your idea of a drought.
Where do we find these clues?
I look closely at a tree's appearance and samples of its bark. We also collect core samples from dead pines. And we look at slices of fallen trees called tree cookies, like this one.
Okay, if I lock in on my first explanation, I might miss other clues or evidence. So I'm holding off on my drought idea. Maybe there's another explanation. We've got to look for more evidence of tree killers. Check out the objects from the museum's collections. Then we'll reconnect and see if my first idea, that the drought is a killer, was right all along.
All right, excellent. So we just heard there from Isabel Perez Vega, and she is sharing with us a phenomenon that she observed in the Uinta Mountains, where she observed many of the lodgepole pine trees that were dying. She wondered what was going on here. Is this normal or not? Yesterday, we decided that this was not normal. It's very different than the historical data that we looked at, and that the trees were dying at a significantly higher rate than they had been in the past. All right, and then we continued our investigation by taking a look at some of the causes, the indicators of tree death in the Uinta Mountains. And so let me go ahead and share with you. Okay, so yesterday we went ahead onto step 8 and we reviewed all of these samples. We observed many of the characteristics for different causes of death. So for example, we observed it for evidence of pathogens. We observed the samples for evidence of predators. We observed for evidence of natural disasters or hazards like drought and wildfire. You then had your data in the data field that you copied into your research assistant notebook. And so we're going to be starting right here on step 12. Okay. Also, I want to say hi to Sardi, who lives in North Carolina. So happy to have you here with us this morning. All right. Okay. We are going to get started now on step 12, and we are going to be working in our research assistant notebook on page 3. Okay, so on step 12, let's go ahead and watch this video together. It says, in this video, Dr. Mitch and I talk about what his team observed in the samples. Listen for the difference between correlation and causation, and listen for what you will analyze next to figure out why there are more lodgepole pine deaths now compared to the past.
I'm glad we looked for more evidence. The collections and field photos show signs of drought like dry holes, orange needles, and tight rings. But I also saw signs of deadly beetles and fungus. Did you? I'm seeing signs of 3 killers: drought, plus beetles and fungus.
That's what scientists are seeing too. We have a combination of factors: drought and a predator, the beetle, and a pathogen, fungus, killing the trees. But strong pines can defend themselves. They drown invading beetles and sap. But pines struggling in a drought are weak. They can't make as much sap to fight beetles. That's why infestations typically kill more trees during a drought. When we see two things that are associated with each other, we say they have a correlation.
So if drought and infestation are correlated, does that mean that the drought is causing the deadly infestations?
Not so fast. Correlation does not mean one thing causes the other thing.
It doesn't?
It just means they could be connected. In this case, it means they happened at the same time. But correlation doesn't mean one thing causes the other. Think about this. There have been droughts before, and the deadly infestations increased, but not like what we're seeing now. So the current drought isn't causing the extraordinary mass death that's going on. It's probably just contributing to it.
Then there's something else. What's different this time?
That's a good question. There's something else scientists have started considering when we look at strange phenomena like this one: climate, the average weather conditions like temperature, rain, and snow in an area. When climate changes, all parts of an ecosystem are affected, including things like trees, beetles, and fungus.
So we need to look at climate data?
Yes, to see if it's changed, and to see how those changes could affect lodgepole pines, bark beetles, and fungus.
It's time to look at a new factor: climate. We'll see if that gives us evidence about what's causing this strange and deadly phenomenon in the Uinta Mountains.
Excellent. All right. So in that video, we heard from Isabel and Mitch, and they reviewed for us some of the evidence that they saw for both pathogens and predators and drought. So there's a lot going on. And we're going to now take a look at more information that's going to help us as we think about the phenomena that's happening in the Uintas. All right. I want to say hi to both Elena, who's a 14-year-old in Layton, Utah, and to Paula from Salt Lake City. Paula was wondering about getting their work back from yesterday. If you filled out the research assistant notebooks, let me just show you. If you filled out the research assistant notebook, then hopefully you printed that out or you downloaded it. So that would be, oh, let me turn off my video so you can see. So when you work on this research assistant notebook, you need to select the download button to save your work. Or if you want to go ahead and download that now and work in the downloaded document, so that way you have your work for tomorrow. Yeah, so that's what I mentioned earlier when some people, if you close this window, if you're working on it and you close it, it will not save your work in there. So you might want to do the download, which in fact I'll do right now. So now I can see it's going to open up the downloaded version. Okay, now I have many of them up. All right, so we are going to be looking at step 13. Have precipitation levels changed in recent years? So this is digging deeper into thinking about drought. Precipitation is one part of climate change or climate data. Looking at whether precipitation levels have changed or stayed the same is an important piece of the puzzle when we consider the changes happening in the Uinta Mountains. While it is important to look at annual precipitation, it is also important to consider patterns of seasonal precipitation too. Use these interactive graphs to examine annual precipitation, winter precipitation, and summer precipitation. Does it appear that precipitation is changing? All right, let's go ahead and select annual. Okay, our task here is to look for evidence of changing precipitation. Precipitation comes in different forms depending on the temperature. In the Uinta Mountains, precipitation is usually snow in the winter and rain in the summer. So we're going to look for evidence of changes in the amount or timing of precipitation. So you're going to, you can move your mouse along the graph and it will show you the data at that point where your mouse is. It will also add lines that will help you look for trends. So for example, if I put my mouse here on this peak, okay, so this is telling me that in around 1909, I want to say, yep, 1909, we saw a significant increase. And it looks like it was actually the highest point in the past 100 years. Now I can look at how often did we get close to that point, or maybe I want to come, let's see here, this is one of the lowest. So we had very, very little precipitation this year. It's in the 1976. And I can look to see how often do we reach that point, right? In the past 100 years. Okay, I'm going to give you a minute to go ahead and examine this graph, see what you notice about the patterns, and then I want you to think about this question. What trend do you see for annual precipitation? Okay, I'm going to give you just a minute to work on that one. Okay, so now you've had a chance to look at that. On your own or with a partner, I want you to respond to the question at the bottom of page 3 in your research assistant notebook. So examine the precipitation data. What patterns do you notice? Okay, so we looked at the annual precipitation together. We're going to now look at the next two. We're going to look at winter and summer. So you can see we have winter and summer. I answered the question on annual and go ahead and select it next. I'm going to look at winter now. And then I'm going to look at summer. And after I look at those, I'm going to add some more notes to this question about my responses there. And I want you to go ahead, you can watch me on my screen, follow along, but go ahead and on your own, review winter and summer and see what you notice. And then again, you're going to respond to that. It says 13, analyze with your partner, examine all of the data. What patterns do you notice? Okay, excellent. So I went ahead and worked on the annual winter and summer, and I added my thoughts to my research assistant notebook right here. Next, we're going to move on to step 14. So I'm going to go ahead and select I'm done. And on step, oh, excuse me. So when you select next, it will take you to this page and you can download the for your reference. You can download that and save it onto your computer if you want to keep that in your notes. Now on step 14, I'm going to go ahead and read this. It says, have temperature levels changed in recent years? Temperature data is another very important part of climate data. When scientists look at temperature data, they often start by examining annual temperatures, annual high temperature and annual low temperature. Even small changes to one of these types of temperature data can be a sign of big changes to an ecosystem. So let's take a look. It says, take a look at these interactive graphs of annual average temperature, winter high and low temperatures, and summer high and low temperatures. Has anything changed? Okay, I'm going to start with the average. Okay, so this is taking all of the temperatures over the whole year and averaging it. All right, so when I look at this, and again, if I move my mouse over, it will show me the different years. So when I look here at the high, this is I guess a fairly high average temperature in 1914. But overall, that temperature, it looks like, is in about the middle, right? So looks like 1984 was a very cold year on average. In fact, it looks like it was the coldest year out of all of the years. All right, so here's the question that we're thinking about. What trend do you see for the annual temperature? Okay, so what trend do you see? Go ahead and take a second to look at that. And go ahead and add notes. So I'm going to say the annual average temperature. And I'm going to add my thoughts here about what I noticed. And again, do you think that the temperature is increasing, decreasing, or does it not seem to be changing to you? And of course, the most important thing is why you think that. So I wrote that I think the temperature is increasing. And I think that because if I look at from 1990, so for the past 30 years, the frequency of lows seems very different. So I noticed there was a little bit of a trend here. The lows were not very low. The years that had low temperatures, they didn't get too low, but I notice here that the majority of the temperatures are falling into the higher range of what's normal for the year. So I'm going to add that to my notes, and I'm going to go ahead and select next. And now I want you to do the same thing for both the winter and summer. So this is taking a closer look at just the winter time of year, just the summer time of year. And go ahead and add those notes to your research assistant notebook. Okay, great. I'm all done. So hopefully you're getting close to being done as well. If you need more time, you can pause my video, of course. And I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next step. So when I looked at this data, what I saw for both the precipitation and for temperature, I did observe some changes, especially in the last 30 years. It seemed that the trends had changed. And so I added those notes here to my research assistant notebook. I'm going to go ahead and select I'm done. And if I want to download the notes about those trends, I can go ahead and download that here, and it has my responses for what I observed. Okay, when you select continue, we're going to move on to section 3, interpret. Okay, so step 15 says, why now? Temperatures are increasing, and we are seeing more frequent years with lower precipitation. What does this tell us about tree death? Less precipitation, meaning drought, can lead to more predation because drought-stressed trees are weaker and less able to defend themselves. But these lodgepole pines have experienced drought before and didn't have the same level of predation from bark beetles. What is different now? It says the answer may lie in phenology. This is the study of the connection between an organism's life cycle and abiotic factors like temperature and precipitation changes that occur. If temperature and precipitation change, it can affect part of an organism's life cycle that depend on these environmental cues. Bark beetles are a large group of beetles that burrow into the tree's bark and disrupt the flow of nutrients and water. In the Uinta Mountains, the type of bark beetle that is responsible for the dying and dead lodgepole pines has been identified as a mountain pine beetle. An understanding of the phenology of mountain pine beetles can help you develop an explanation for why mountain pine beetles are killing more lodgepole pines now than they did in the past. All right, so we're going to go ahead and take a look at section 3, interpret. It says we're going to go ahead and read here to learn more about mountain pine beetles. And we're going to read through the facts below. Which statements offer clues about how much pine beetle life cycles might be affected by changing temperature and precipitation patterns? And what is it about changing temperature and precipitation that makes the mountain pine beetle an especially successful predator in these environmental conditions? Okay, I'm going to give you some time to go ahead and read this step 16. And then in our research assistant notebook, we are going to be working on page 4. So it says, page 4 is for steps 16 and 17. It says, gather evidence about mountain pine beetles. Then reflect on all of the data you've gathered to construct an explanation supported by evidence for why lodgepole pine tree deaths are so much worse now than in the past. It says evaluate and interpret. Research information about mountain pine beetle. Record the evidence you think could help you explain why there are more lodgepole pine deaths now than in the past. Okay, so I'm going to read through this and I'm going to write the important fact here. And then I'm going to share why do I think this is important. And I'm going to go ahead and fill this out. So you're going to choose 4 important facts. Now, if you want to pause me, you can, or mute the video. But I'm going to go ahead and read aloud for anyone who would like to follow along. All right, so it says, number 1, mountain pine beetles in the Uinta Mountains have a 1-year life cycle. Now, if I want more information about some of the words that are blue, I can go ahead and click on that. So it says life cycle refers to the stages that an organism goes through during its life. Mountain pine beetles go through 4 basic stages: egg, larva, pupa, adult. When adults emerge from the trees they've been living in, they look for healthy trees to burrow in, mate, and lay their eggs. Number 3, beetles will dig vertical tunnels called galleries in the phloem of a tree. The female beetle lays her eggs in the phloem so that her offspring will have plenty to eat as they grow through the fall and winter months. Okay, number 4 says females usually lay about 75 eggs in the galleries. Number 5, in the Uinta Mountains, adult beetles do not live through the winter. They die in late summer or early fall. Ew, that seems like, to me, a very interesting fact. So it says, in the Uinta Mountains, adult beetles do not live through the winter, and they die in the late summer and fall. I'm going to add that one to my notebook. All right, nestled into the galleries inside the tree, the eggs hatch and become larvae. They burrow away from the main tunnel, making distinct horizontal lines in the phloem. The larvae continue to feed on the phloem through the winter. If it gets really cold, some larvae will die, but most can survive relatively cold temperatures because they produce a chemical that acts like an antifreeze in their bodies. However, temperatures below 31 Fahrenheit or 35 Celsius, negative 35 Celsius, are often deadly to larvae. Okay, I'm going to also make a note of that. If weather gets colder down to negative 10 degrees Celsius or 14 degrees Fahrenheit earlier than normal in the fall, larvae will not have the time to produce the chemicals that act like an antifreeze and may die. I'm also going to put that into my research assistant notebook. Number 9, it says also if weather gets colder before there has been enough snowpack to insulate the bottom 4 feet of the tree, larvae may die because they are more exposed to the cold. Through June and July, larvae develop further and become pupa. They continue living underneath the bark and feasting on the tree's phloem. The pupa become adults and emerge from the tree when temperatures are warm enough, usually mid-June through mid-September. If temperatures warm up earlier than June, beetles will emerge from the trees earlier. Usually mountain pine beetles lay just one group of eggs, but if there is enough time before it gets cold, they may lay eggs again in the summer months. Let's see, I only have one more spot. I'm going to use this last fact. All right. I'm going to give you a minute. Go ahead and make note of which facts you think are the most important and why you think that. I'm going to go ahead and work on my end, and then we can talk about it in just a minute. All right, excellent. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop there because I'm done with my research assistant notebook pages. If you need more time, you can, of course, you can pause my video anytime and you can join back when you are ready. All right, so as I was filling this out, I selected a number of facts that I thought were the most relevant when thinking about changes in the Uinta Mountains. One of the facts that I selected was, in the Uinta Mountains, adult beetles do not live through the winter. They die in late summer or early fall. So one thing that made me think, based on that fact, was that if the winters are more mild, then that could explain an increase in population. So some of the adults might be able to survive the winter. Another fact that I selected was, usually mountain pine beetles lay just one group of eggs each year, but if there is enough time before it gets cold again, they may lay eggs again in late summer. So I had noted that if the spring and fall were both warmer, so if we saw an increase in the temperature during those times of year, it would increase the chances the bark beetles would be able to lay more eggs and therefore increase the population. Okay, so most of the facts that I observed, I noticed that milder weather, regardless of the time of year, might result in an increase in the bark beetle population. So that's what I noticed. All right, I'm going to go ahead and select next on to step 17. Now here, step 17 says, construct and explain. Construct an evidence-based explanation for what is killing the lodgepole pines in the Uinta Mountains and why this outbreak is worse than past outbreaks. Type your explanation here and download it, or write your explanation in your research assistant notebook. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the research assistant notebook, which is also step 17 on page 5. So it says, interpret and reflect. Look at your findings from steps 10 through 16 to construct your explanation for why there are more lodgepole pine deaths now compared with the past. Okay, so you need to have your claim, which is your explanation for why are the lodgepole pine trees dying at a faster rate compared with the past. I want you to cite at least 3 pieces of evidence from this investigation to back up your claim, and explain your reasoning. So explain how the evidence you cited backs up your claim. Why did you choose this piece of evidence? All right, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to go ahead and be working on your claim. Again, you can work directly here, or you can work in your research assistant notebook. And then you're going to, you can submit without downloading, or you can download and submit. Okay, I'm going to give you 5 minutes and I'll be working on my screen as well, so you can follow along with me if you want. Okay, that was a little bit of time, hopefully for you to fill in your research assistant notebook and also fill in your claim, evidence, and reasoning. I'm going to go ahead and share some of my ideas. If you need more time though, go ahead and pause the video and you can continue to work on that step. All right, here's what I had from my notes from the past 2 days. So here's my claim. Weakened trees due to drought are more vulnerable to pathogens and predation. Milder temps increased bark beetle populations, and increased bark beetles increase the spread of blue stain fungi. So what was my evidence? Temperatures have been increasing, and I saw that in both the average temps and in the precipitation data that has showed a decrease, made me believe that drought was occurring. Usually mountain pine beetles lay eggs just once a year, but if there are mild temperatures, they can lay eggs again in late summer. And so my reasoning there was that these mild temperatures are increasing the bark beetle population. And my last piece of evidence was looking at the tree cookies, which showed significant evidence of both bark beetles and the blue stain fungi in the dead tree cookies that we looked at. So that made me believe that both pathogens and predation are a leading cause of tree death. All right, so that was I'm going to go ahead and submit this without downloading and move on to section 4 in our last couple of minutes. All right, here is I'm going to review the directions here, and then during study hall time, I would like you to continue to work on the communicate step. So communicating your research is a very important science practice. Use these tips to help you prepare your explanation supported by evidence for your research question. So tip number 1, check your evidence. Could your evidence support more than one idea? So that's a good one. So I should go back and look at, I had 3 pieces of evidence. Could that evidence support any other explanations? If so, state what explanations the evidence could support and what additional information would help you narrow down your options. Okay, is my evidence strong or weak? Remember, strong evidence supports one idea. Weak evidence supports more than one idea. So let's go ahead and look at tip number 2. Disconfirming evidence is important too. What ideas did you rule out? Explaining why you ruled out ideas is important too, and helps make your explanation stronger. So what is disconfirming evidence? Remember, disconfirming evidence helps you rule out ideas. So for example, I had one idea was a wildfire, which I did not have any evidence of wildfire scars or wildfire damage to the tree samples that I looked at. And so the lack of tree scars and fire damage to the bark was a way for me to have disconfirming evidence for wildfires. All right, tip number 3, practice presenting your ideas before you have to share with a larger group. If you do this in front of your peers, family, or friends, ask for feedback on anything that doesn't make sense to them. Then revise your presentation to make it easier to understand. Okay, so in my research assistant notebook, it says section 4, communicate, steps 18 and 19. Okay, during study hall today, why don't you go ahead and you can work on writing a short play to communicate your explanation for what is killing the lodgepole pine trees and why it is happening at a faster rate than we've seen in the past. You can use personification to develop characters for this ecosystem. For example, the lodgepole pine tree may be visiting a doctor. It may describe its symptoms. Its doctor may offer you a diagnosis and why it is happening. Okay, so be creative, use the script template if you like to help, and you can share your work with your teacher, your family, your friends. And it says, video review. Think about or discuss with your partner how your findings compare to Isabel's and Dr. Mitch's findings. Did you come to the same conclusions? Why or why not? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and watch the video now. This is our last step. And then during study hall, you can, of course, ask questions. We can continue to have discussions about your findings, or you can go ahead and work on that play. And then at 11 a.m., we're going to have our guest speaker joining us. Remember, our speaker today is Vanessa Bailey. She is a graduate student at the University of Utah studying geography. And we look forward to seeing Vanessa shortly. So let me go ahead and let's watch this last video together.
The weather data makes a big difference, doesn't it? Turns out that the temperature changes have had a big effect on the beetles. Okay, you've analyzed the evidence and come up with your explanations for what is killing the lodgepole pines. Let's see what Dr. Mitch thinks about my explanation. I'm thinking the evidence shows bark beetles and warmer winter temperatures are mostly to blame for all the dead lodgepole pines. The longer stretches of warmer weather lets beetles reproduce more often, and the winters aren't as cold, which lets more beetle larvae survive. So there are a lot more beetles around attacking trees. Plus, when beetles attack, they bring the blue stain fungus with them. Then the fungus also cuts off water from circulating through the trees. Is that what you think?
That's a big part of it, but remember, we were also seeing evidence of drought. the drought makes it harder for the trees to fight off the beetle and fungus attacks. So we've got many factors. Drought, which weakens the trees, warmer temperatures, which allow for more beetles, and fungus, complements of the beetles.
Drought, warmer climate, beetles, and fungus. That's a lot for trees to deal with. Are any pines going to survive?
We think some will survive, but there's something else to consider. A lot of other plants and animals depend on these pines. If the pine numbers shrink, how will those organisms be affected?
Sounds like a topic for another investigation.
I think so too.
What's killing the lodgepole pines of Utah's Uinta Mountains? You made observations, collected and analyzed data, and developed your own ideas to answer this question. Thanks for your work. We hope you'll join us for the next Research Quest.
All right, so with that video, we have wrapped up class for today. I, of course, encourage you to continue to work on the communicate step during study hall. I'm here for any questions, and we look forward to having our guest speaker at 11 a.m. So please join us again at 11 a.m. Feel free to take a break, stretch your legs, and we will see you back here at 11 a.m. If you are done working for today. Hey, just checking in. If you are still here with me during study hall, I am available for questions. I'm happy to help you with anything that you might be working on. If not, we hope to see you back, of course, at 11 a.m. Please join us as we're going to have a conversation with Vanessa Bailey. She's a graduate student at the University of Utah, and she works with the Natural History Museum of Utah's scientists. And so we're excited to meet with her shortly. Again, that will be in about 17 minutes, so please join us then. Hi, welcome to Research Quest Live. We're excited to have you here and joining us for a conversation with Vanessa Bailey, who is a University of Utah graduate student in geography. And I'm excited to introduce Vanessa. She is very interesting for our conversation today because we've been working in Research Quest Live on how ecosystems respond to past, present, and future climate change. We're specifically looking at the Uinta Mountains. Now, in Vanessa's work, she studies this big idea of how ecosystems respond to past, present, and future climate change. She studies that by using process-based vegetation models that incorporate natural ecosystem processes and different plant types. Temperature and precipitation data are needed as inputs, so acquiring data like that used in the Uinta Research Quest investigations is a substantial part of her work. We're very excited to have her on today, and if you want to go ahead and say hello.
Hi.
We're excited to have you here. We're going to be having this live Q&A session. We are streaming on multiple platforms. If you have any issues with the sound quality or the viewer, please visit researchquestlive.org where you can view our live video there. And if you are on Research Quest Live, you can go ahead and make the viewer full screen. In fact, I'll show on my page right here so you can see. I'm going to go to researchquestlive.org. Maybe. There it is. And here we have the live stream. You can go ahead and click on the live stream and make it full screen like that. There I am. So wonderful. Okay. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So go ahead and make us full screen, check your volume, check your audio. And again, join us on researchquestlive.org if you have any issues. All right, let's jump in just a little bit. And then for those of you out there that are joining us via Facebook, we'll be telling you more about Research Quest Live in just a little bit. So Vanessa, why don't you go ahead and tell us about what your current research is all about?
Okay, sure. So like you said, I'm interested primarily in how ecosystems respond to climate change, and that includes in the past and currently and into the future. I do that using a process-based model, which essentially takes mathematical representations of natural processes like photosynthesis to grow a variety of plant types. And so I'm looking at a couple of questions related to that, making sure how we're representing those systems is accurate to what we see in the real world.
Excellent. So thank you for sharing that. All right. Well, I have a lot of questions. Let me see. Let me go. How about, so we know you're a graduate student, and we have we have students who are listening in. So the program we've been working on is for middle school students. So we have many in the middle school age range. Can you help us understand what is the difference between graduate school and undergraduate school? And then maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you studied with your undergraduate program.
Sure. So undergraduate school is maybe just like a level up, you know, from high school. So you'll still be taking a wide range of classes in most subjects, and then you get to specialize in a specific topic or field. And so graduate school then is just the next level of that. So now you're like really, really focused on one field, one topic, really driving into specifics of that. You have classes to take, but you're also working on a bigger research project with an advisor who you work closely with, who has the same interests as you. And then usually on top of that, you also have either a research assistantship or a teaching assistantship to help essentially pay for you to be in school. So there's a lot to manage with graduate school. And so for my undergraduate though, I also studied geography and got into, you know, climate especially. I had a really good undergraduate advisor. And yeah, so I still took like a wide variety of classes, but really focused on geography topics.
Excellent. All right. Thank you for kind of giving that big picture so students understand what does a graduate student even mean? All right. So you've kind of discussed this a little bit about why you decided to go to graduate school. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about that. What were your reasons for going to graduate school? And then what are you hoping to do after graduate school?
Sure. So when I started undergrad, I didn't really have plans to go to graduate school. I think that's probably how it goes for most students. You go to college and you kind of figure it out as you're going along. So during undergrad, I started working with a professor there who involved me in his lab, and then knew people here at the University of Utah and kind of got me connected in that way. So I guess just really getting to know professors and like hear what they have to say, and just having encouragement and support to know what to do with graduate school. That's kind of how I ended up here at the U. I also had a fellowship through one of the organizations on campus related to sustainability. So that was a really good opportunity here. And then, sorry, I forgot. I think you asked what my plans are, or?
Yes, yeah, what you're hoping to do after.
Yeah, so fingers crossed, as long as everything goes well, I would like to be at a large university one day, helping to teach students, work with students, share my knowledge about geography and ecology. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing that. I know it probably feels a little funny to talk about, but we have lots of young people out there and they're very curious about these next steps and making decisions now and preparing for the future. And I think it's really helpful too for them to understand that scientists do not work alone. Scientists have big teams with lots of people and lots of students who are working with them. And that's one of the ways that we maybe find out what we really enjoy is by working with professors and with scientists during school. So thanks for giving a little insight into that. I think it's very helpful. So again, we're here with Vanessa Bailey. She is a graduate student at the University of Utah in geography. And we're highlighting Vanessa and her work as it relates to our Research Quest investigation that we were doing today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen one more time. So Research Quest Live is a program that we are offering at the Natural History Museum of Utah. And earlier today, we've been working on change in the Uinta Mountains, what is normal or not. You can see here, these are the investigations we've been working on. We have class daily, Monday through Friday at 9:30 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. And this program is offered, of course, through the Natural History Museum of Utah. If you want to learn more about Research Quest Live, or you can participate in these classes on demand, you can visit the Natural History Museum of Utah's website. And every day we are going to have a guest speaker, just like Vanessa at 11 a.m. is going to be joining us every day, 11 a.m. We're going to have a chat with a different scientist or expert. All right, so we're really excited to have Vanessa here with us today. And I would like to dig a little bit deeper into your current research and what you're working on. So my next question, oh, and I should add, sorry, Vanessa, I forgot. I was going to add, if you have a question for Vanessa, you can go ahead and submit that here. Ask a question. So in the viewer, you should be able to see the Ask a Question button. If you're in full screen, you won't see that button. So you need to go ahead and make it smaller. If you want to submit a question, you can ask a question there for Vanessa. If you are joining us on Facebook, then you'll need to jump over to Research Quest Live and you can find the viewer there and ask a question. All right, so we have questions coming in from students. Now I have another question for you about your research. How can plants tell us that the Earth's climate has changed?
Oh, okay, great question. One example really comes to mind, and so what we are seeing a lot in forest systems here in North America is that aspen, which is one type of tree, has been dying off a lot recently, and we can just see that by going into a forest system and seeing, you know, that the trees are no longer living. And a lot of that has really been tied to changing climate and primarily drought. So every plant has a certain tolerance or level of water that is ideal for their conditions. And some can tolerate or handle really, really small amounts of water, but not all trees can handle small amounts. Some need, you know, a lot or a moderate amount. So when climate changes and when those temperature or precipitation conditions are no longer the same as they were in the past, or when these trees initially started growing there, they might respond by oftentimes perhaps dying. Sometimes they just won't be reproductively active anymore. So they might still be able to survive, but they might not be dispersing or producing cones or pollen as much or as readily. So when vegetation is a really good measure of how climates have changed, because we can kind of compare it to the conditions that those plant types need to survive.
Wow, that's so helpful to think about, that it's not only does it impact maybe the survival of the plant, but also the way that it reproduces. So it might slow its production of pollen or seeds. That's really interesting. I bet a lot of students out there didn't realize that. We have a question that we just got from Mark, and Mark is wondering, are plants able to like move and survive in different places if where they're living is no longer an ideal place to live? Are they able to, I guess, move somewhere?
Right. Another great question. So unlike animals who can really rapidly move where they're living, you know, to find ideal conditions, or like people, we can easily, like, if our living conditions are no longer great, we can usually pick up and move to somewhere else. Animals are able to move pretty rapidly to accommodate changes. But trees, you know, are stationed in one place. They're tied by their roots. They can migrate. And so that's kind of what I was talking about with like this dispersal, spreading pollen, and eventually migrating to different regions with their ideal climate conditions. But unfortunately, that takes a lot of time, or takes more time than the time we might need with how fast climate is changing today. So if a plant is able to increase its range, those trees have to establish, grow before it can further continue to spread into new regions. So again, just the time isn't really matching up with what we need for them to find the right climate conditions. humans can help with that and might plant, what trees might be ideal in the future. But for the natural system, often we see that plants aren't able to keep up, at least with the rate of climate change we're experiencing today.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, when we were looking at the Uintas today, just thinking about the drought, and then there were many other factors going on as well, that the trees being weakened, again, the drought might not have killed them, but they were weakened, which invited other pathogens and predators to have greater impact. So we recognize it's pretty complex, all the systems out there. So I know in your research, you think a lot about ecosystems. What aspects of ecosystems are you most interested in and why?
Yeah, a couple. So to start, I'll talk about the carbon cycle. And so I am guessing that most students know that carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has been increasing over time. Ecosystems are really good, and that they can often help to decrease the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere because they're taking it up by the plant structures themselves. So that's one thing I'm interested in, how well plants are able to uptake carbon and put it into their structures, again, because of how important that is with changing climate. And another thing I'm interested in is related to death within ecosystems. So making sure that the models that I'm using are representing them accurately, so that looking into the future, we have a clear picture of what outcomes we can expect.
Great. Thank you so much for that explanation. I had to turn off my mute for a second there. We received a question from Amy. Amy is wondering, does that mean we'll see more weeds that grow in months than trees, which can take years to grow?
It depends. So different ecosystems are experiencing, a lot of different responses to changing things. Certain grasses certainly are able to grow back quicker than trees. If we would have a severe fire in an area, first we'll see, grasses reestablished before being able to see trees. But in different regions, we can see other effects. So if you would imagine a place where you have cattle grazing, they actually end up selecting the grasses first. They're going to choose to eat grasses. And so in those environments, we actually see more woody or like tree-like vegetation establishing and being more dominant now in this ecosystem, just because of the effect that cattle has had. So I would say it's complex. It depends on the region you're looking at. Certainly grasses are able to establish, quicker following disturbance and things like that, but it just depends.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for providing a little insight into that question, which is a great question. Maybe Amy has a follow-up question, which you can submit at the Ask a Question. Amy knows how to do that, so maybe you have a follow-up. All right, my next question is about your research, Vanessa, and I don't at all know if this is true, but do you look at fossilized plants in your research at all?
I don't, but it is useful. So a lot of people in labs in the geography department are looking at pollen in sediments, and so pollen helps to give an indication of what types of plants were there in the past, which then we can kind of relate to what climates were there in the past as well, given what we understand of their current climate conditions. So I would say, while I don't, it's really important to have that pollen so that I can use it as a comparison with my outputs from the model. So if I'm modeling for the past, I would use pollen or plant material from the past to compare to make sure it's fairly accurate.
Great. Okay, I have another question from a student. So Tyler is wondering, Do you look at fires to see which plants survive or die? When we were studying the Uintas, one of the things we looked for evidence was evidence of fire. Wildfire is a possible explanation for the death that we observed, but we didn't find much evidence for that. So I think that that's maybe where Tyler's question is coming from.
Okay. Yeah, so like we look at pollen of the past, we can also look at charcoal of the past. And so often scientists will go out either to a lake. Lakes, because they're kind of like depressions on the landscape, serve as really good traps of material. And so if there was a fire near in the past, charcoal from that fire can settle onto the lake, sink down to the bottom, and then we can go and collect a core that has all that material. So it has, just like the sediment from the lake, but it will also have charcoal and pollen. When we take that out, we can use it to go back in time to see what was happening. So when we take it, section it out, clean it, put it under a microscope, we can count how many charcoal pieces there are. And higher amounts of charcoal would indicate, greater fire. Also, more recently, people have been studying the shape of the charcoal. So if charcoal looks, in a certain structure, we can say, oh, that was probably a grass that burned at that time. Or if it's in a different structure, it might look more like charcoal that comes from trees. And so that's kind of one thing that is also being explored at the U. Dr. Mitch Power and his students have looked at that a little bit to see what types of material were burning in the past.
All right, thank you. So another question is just about using models. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you use models, or the scientists that you've worked with use models. Using models is becoming emphasized in our science classrooms now with some new standards that we have. And so I think kids are trying to wrap their head around, like, what is a model exactly? Like, how do we use models and build them?
Sure. There are a lot of different types of models. So it kind of depends, what exactly you're looking at or what exactly you're studying, but I'll talk about the model that I specifically use. The model, so before I get into that, what models are just trying to simplify what we see in the world. So the model that I use, it's a process-based model, which essentially means we're trying to mirror how actual ecosystems are operating. So we're including processes like photosynthesis, processes like water uptake, competition between different trees in an area. And to do that, we have all these mathematical equations set up to try to represent that. We input climate data like temperature, precipitation, we'll even input CO2, carbon dioxide levels, so that we can kind of have this look like we actually see on the landscape. And then it takes all that data, takes all these functions and kind of, runs through making the calculations to see what might actually be happening. And so it is very complex. It depends how complex you want to make it. You can make them as simple or difficult as you want, but in general, we take inputs about the environment that we know, have it, go through these mathematical processes that look or that are similar to what we see in the real world, and then different vegetation types can grow from that. Oh, I can't hear you.
Of course, I'm going to do that. I just want to say thank you again for joining us. We still have time for more questions. I'm here with Vanessa Bailey. She's a graduate student at the University of Utah in geography. And we're speaking with her today because of our Research Quest Live class that we completed today. We used a number of models. Specifically, we used temperature and precipitation data looking in the Uinta Mountains as part of our explanation for a phenomenon that's being observed, which is mass death of the lodgepole pine trees. And if you're interested in learning more about our Research Quest Live classes, tomorrow we are going to have class 9:30 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. Join us as we figure out who are the winners and losers in a rapidly changing forest. So tomorrow we're going to really dig deeper into this ecosystem question and looking at the relationships between different living things and thinking about the impacts if one of those living things is negatively impacted and is disappearing, what happens to all the other living things. All right, so we're on researchquestlive.org. If you want to submit a question, we still have time for a couple more questions with Vanessa. Tina's wondering, Vanessa, how much of your time is spent outside? Not when we're talking about your research. So, you know, outside doing field work, collecting data, or mostly working on a computer and building your models.
Probably, unfortunately, most of my time is spent inside on my computer, just because of the nature of what I'm studying and that it is dependent on, you know, running this model. However, there's definitely opportunities to do field work, which is one of my favorite parts. You know, I've gone to different lake sites, some in the Uintas, some in Wisconsin, to collect the sediments to then analyze later in the lab for charcoal and pollen. So I don't necessarily, you know, study it in the lab, but if there's ever an opportunity to go help collect in the field, I definitely take advantage of that. So yeah, for my work, not a ton, but it's definitely a perk of finding fieldwork opportunities.
Excellent. All right. My next question is about climate change, which you've mentioned many times. So when you think about climate change and maybe the change where we live here in Utah, how much of modern climate change is natural or unnatural? That's kind of a tough question to answer. So maybe just thinking about climate change here where we are in Utah and what we've observed.
Yeah. So climate change is, you know, really variable worldwide, but what we can see is that given, you know, our understanding of past climate and of different trends, we can see that, you know, overall we're kind of on a different trajectory than we would expect if the world was operating independent of humans. And so humans have, you know, emitted a lot of fossil fuels in recent time. And again, that's really driving increases in CO2 levels in the atmosphere, which helps retain heat in our atmosphere. So I would say, while climate change is always happening, the direction that it's happening in and also the rate that it's happening in is largely being driven by humans. And so we have seen climate change in the past, but again, like what we're seeing today, the direction that it's going is, I would say, human caused.
All right, great response. I know that's a complicated one to answer in a nutshell. And I know the kids have a lot of questions, of course, as well about that. Why do you feel that the work that you're doing is important?
Yeah, there's a lot of things I think we don't necessarily immediately realize that ecosystems provide for us. So if you think of an ecosystem, you might think, oh, it provides us with, you know, timber and wood sources. It provides us with food sources. It also provides us with the opportunity to get into nature, which is really good for our well-being. But there's even more that ecosystems do for us. They help regulate the air. They help, you know, purify water, take up CO2, like I said before. And so really understanding these connections is really beneficial for humans. If we know how ecosystems are functioning, we can essentially help or kind of use that to our advantage to make sure they're functioning in the best way possible so that we can get all those great benefits that they provide to us.
Great. This is going to be maybe one of the last questions. I'd love to hear, since again, we have lots of young people hopefully listening in right now. Could you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to become interested in this field? Or was there an experience that you had that really, I guess, motivated you to continue to work in the area that you're studying?
Sure. So my path to where I am currently, during the beginning of undergrad was a little uncertain, but after I made the switch, I've been, very happy. I haven't really looked back. And I think what largely it is it's just really interesting to see like all the different ways that ecosystems are responding, but also just how important that is. So I'm from rural Wisconsin, and knowing that the climate can stay, how we need it for, farming and different practices like industries is really important. So I think just, connecting it back to these different benefits we need, these things that are just essential for our livelihoods, and really wanting to help maintain, how things were, is really important to me, just because I don't want things to change. I know it's important for how society is currently functioning, to have things remain relatively stable. So I would just say, just like knowing just wanting my home, my family, my friends to be able to continue to live as they have.
Well, thank you again, Vanessa. It's wonderful chatting with you and hearing about your work, and getting to hear from a graduate student who's currently in the doing it all, figuring out all these things. And I think that it's likely to be an inspiration to many of our students out there who are someday thinking about, when I'm in college and I want to study science, and thinking about what that looks like. We really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. Again, this was a special guest conversation with Vanessa Bailey, as a graduate student at the University of Utah in geography. And this program is part of our Research Quest Live program. We have classes daily, and you can learn more about that at the Natural History Museum of Utah's website. And if you want to join us for our class tomorrow, we are going to be talking about who wins and who loses in a rapidly changing forest. So really taking this deeper look into the ecosystem and how changes in that ecosystem might play out. We're excited to continue the Research Quest Live program. If you have feedback from today's conversation or from class, I'm going to go ahead and share the link where we would love to get your feedback right here. And if you could go ahead and visit us there to provide feedback on today's class, as well as if you want to receive our certificate of completion. At the end of each class that you complete, you will receive a certificate by submitting this form here at nhmu.utah.edu/rqlive-share. Thank you again for participating today, and we look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Mm-hmm.